here just a sec. That was aimed at people who thought that jam sessions is quite scary and maybe need this like extra push to be able to go up on the jam sessions and play. So this kind of started with one of the inclusion initiatives, and then ended up with this example of a student who felt like this pressure. I'm just going to go ahead and read it out loud. I know you can read it yourself, but so this student, who is a female musician, says, "I remember in the first year we had a jam session. The person who runs it incredibly good is incredibly good at going out into the audience and picking out those who haven't yet been up to jam and who might think it's scary to take the initiative themselves. And after we played and about to go back down, the others turned to each other and are like, 'Oh, this was so much fun playing with you. Yeah, this was really cool. We have to form a band.' And no one looked at me. None of the boys looked at me. So this is one of the examples where we see this. It's not as like on the surface kind of discrimination, but it's very subtle, and yet again, it's very like heartbreaking and very kind of setting the tone for the rest of the time she had in the education. So what initially kind of appeared to be this nice including gesture that was aimed at namely people who found it difficult to go up and play at the jam sessions ended up in this like really bad experience for this student who that kind of yeah, made a huge yeah, a difficult time for the student to be able to work through the rest of her time at the study program. So this student kind of experienced being othered in the jam session, and it also kind of reflects on how she went into this jam sessions with a lot of like insecurity and then also find herself very excluded in this like very spontaneous creation of this band that is happening on the stage right after the jam performance. So this feeling of not being seen or actively overlooked is one of kind of the issues that kept coming up in the interviews. So gender-based discrimination, we see how I've taken kind of a starting point into what kind of undermines a sense of belonging at this jazz program. And we see this either as the kind of example demonstrated, this invisibility in musical settings where some people are like forming this band and you are kind of invisible. At the same time, I also see lots of examples of hypervisibility that you, as a woman on the stage, gets because you are the only one, gets very like visible, and kind of your body uh, is becoming the stranger on the stage, that makes both audience and yeah, people in the room look more to you because it's like hyper visible because you're different than the other bodies on the stage. So another empirical finding is these questions of doubts whether women or students receive some kind of special treatment in the admission process that has like come up in several examples in the interviews. Where the male students kind of question, okay, is this woman actually she got in on the same like admission process as we did, for example. Another example is being or feeling othered in the classroom. There is like this selective eye contact or the feeling of being treated as a token. And then we have like these masculine expectations that kind of limits the scope of action. The binary, cis-normative and male dominated models of practice that we see in the pedagogy and in like, yeah, in the jazz, playing of jazz in general. So in my project, I look at how and what kind of barriers prevents certain bodies, like this example from before, of feeling this sense of belonging in the like institutional space and also in the like jam sessions. And I have been working very closely with a student group who work with kind of inclusion at this study program. To kind of see, okay, map what are the barriers that prevent these bodies from feeling a sense of belonging, and also what openings for change can we actually glimpse in the work that the students do in like organizing inclusion work. So here we have also kind of found a way of exploring how inclusion work can look, and queering space has been kind of in the center of some of the workshop I did. So queering space, when I have kind of worked with this project, I've come to understand inclusion as a very collective and ongoing process. Um, that kind of breaks with these like rigid structures and systems that always kind of works towards imagining and realizing a more inclusive space in jazz. And we have taken like the starting point of Sarah Ahmed, who is um, talking about creating a space that as like imagined as an organizing space in which bodies are not presumed to follow specific lines and where they can move freely rather than easily. So this critical perspectives of how bodies that also might not align with these spaces are read as other in a jam session, for example, and this is kind of providing the starting point of how we can imagine alternative spaces. Yeah. So with the students, we are already kind of questioning and reflecting on how binary and cis-normative, etc., models of practice are kind of shaping the experience at the jazz community, and looking at how can we actually change these settings. So the students and staff are very active in the workshops and kind of helping in imagining the new ways of understanding gender within the jazz industry. Yeah. Um, I'm just looking at the clock now. I think I should be wrapping up, right? So
Yes, please.
I'm just gonna go ahead and wrap up with some of the kind of findings that I did in my first article. And this is the student-led diversity work is very focused on foregrounding the relational, addressing vulnerability, and opening space for experience sharing very shortly. And if you want to read more of this work, I published the first article in the Jazz Research Journal. Here's the link to that. All right, I am ready for some questions if you have any.
Thank you so much, Liv. Yes, please. Thank you. Questions, exactly. Oh, we see the Professor Wei Hong has one.
Yeah, yeah, thank you, Leo. Thank you so much for this presentation. I was wondering how is this line of tokenism research developed in Europe? Because as you will see, my student Chenyue will present another paper related to tokenism in China. But we had the question from the reviewers said that all the papers you cited seem to be very old, and what's your theoretical contribution? And is this still a new phenomenon that we're studying? So yeah, I'm very glad to see that your paper was published last year. So is this line of research still very popular in Norway or in Europe?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think with the tokenism, yeah, it's a very like kind of old term now, I guess, but I also see how it's very like still very relevant, maybe in a different way from what we saw before, because there is like, of course, still we have this very tokenistic kind of discrimination. But when we kind of work with that or around this issue of tokenism, when it comes to inclusion, I feel like it's very or the students at least they kind of feel the pressure as a woman, for example, in a jazz yeah, one of the classes in the jazz study program, they have kind of voiced this issue of having to be the one who is working towards inclusion and like anti-discrimination because of their gender, and that has been very like clearly voiced within the student group. So now when they work with this inclusion, different kinds of like action towards inclusion that are more like relation caring, or that is kind of the starting point for their inclusion work. We try to figure out how to kind of avoid this tokenistic approach and seeing, okay, we don't see enough women on the stage, therefore we have to focus on having a women's jam. That is not the approach that we are going. It's more like, how can we change the kind of room or the feeling in the jam sessions so that a more diverse group of like genders can actually, or they want to go to the jam session. So we're looking more into what is kind of wrong with the jam session rather than how can we make these jam sessions about women only, if that makes sense. But yeah, I still use a lot of these the literature from the 90s, for example, I think, where like tokenism was kind of framed and talked a lot about. So it's kind of like the old references, but I try to have a new, yeah, talking and viewing tokenism and tokenistic behavior from like an inclusion point of view, if that makes sense.
Thank you. We will read your paper.
Thank you. Was there another question?
Just a quick one. Yes, this is from Roger, who put it in the chat because of the internet troubles. The question is, does jazz seem to differ from other types of music in particular ways on this topic of exclusion? So basically, how is it only jazz, or can we see it elsewhere?
I think, yeah, we definitely see it elsewhere as well. What is I found very intriguing about jazz and why I kind of started with this project is because I have been like, yeah, working a lot with jazz musicians through like arranging concerts and so, and it always seemed to me to be like this very like open and very like including gestures and everything was like very present in those rooms. And still there seemed to be like this very, yeah, extremely clear gender. There's not a gender balance. And there was lots of like mostly male dominated groups that came and played like in this concert series that I had. So, and I play like classical music, and I saw that we have actually like got this gender balance in the classical industry, and it's more, I mean, I feel like the level of discrimination is more subtle in the jazz settings, where in the classical, for example, I mean, the pop is more, I guess, similar to the jazz industry, but from my experience in the classical industry, it's clear where the discrimination is, where in the jazz kind of community, it's not that clear. And that is what I found like intriguing, that we see like this, there's no gender balance, but still they seem very like including in their behavior and everything. So where is it that it kind of goes wrong in this yeah, inclusion work?
Thank you, Liv. Yeah, very, very interesting. And actually, that leads us very nicely now. Professor Wei Hong mentioned already the notion of tokenism, right, in terms of gender, in terms of female participation. So I would Just like, yeah, thank you again, and just move on to our next speaker, Chenyue Pan, who is here, and I will see if I can take over the hostship, if that's a thing. I didn't from you, Liv.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's all good. Yes, I think we're all good to go.
Hi, everybody. Can you see the presentation, the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, just start. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Chenyue, and I'm a PhD candidate at Tsinghua University now. And today I'm very happy to be invited to attend this year's SOMAT online meeting. And just as Professor Hong has introduced me before, I will going to present a presentation about the tokenized female undergraduates in STEM fields. And as Liv is focused on the musical education, and our research is focused on the science and technology education. And it's a case study based on an elite university in China. And first is the introduction parts. And we can tell that nowadays women are still underrepresented in STEM fields worldwide, especially in the elite academic environments. And despite several measures has been taken to achieve the gender equality, we can tell that nowadays they still remain severely underrepresented in STEM fields, according to the OECD statistics in 2023. And our research actually is addressing the persistent gender gap, and the leaky pipeline in STEM remains a central puzzle in the sociology of science. And our research focuses on these two critical issues. One is the underrepresentation of female undergraduates and their high dropout rates. And the leaky pipeline is a very famous series in the science and technology studies. And actually, it describes the systematic loss of women at various stages of scientific careers. And we can tell from the graph, it's from the childhood and to middle school, high school, and undergraduates, and later is their career life. The professional pipeline in science consists of various stages, and at each junction, a high proportion of women leak out compared to their male counterparts, according to the previous research. And according to Spears' research, we can also found the critical role of the undergraduate stage, women's dropout rates are particularly high at the undergraduate level, and the choice made at this stage can have a crucial impact on their future career choice. So that is also the reason why we focus on the female students' undergraduate stage. And we use the tokenism effect as our theoretical framework. And it first comes from Cantor in last century. Cantor conducted a research called the men and women of the corporation, and she done her work in a Fortune 500 company and focused on the minority, the women in the company. And later she developed into 4 different group types to analyze. The first is uniform, and then the skilled when the ratio becomes to 80s and 15s, and tokenism always occurs here. And then the title is 60s, this 30s, and when it comes higher, it becomes half and half and more or less. And when you are the minority of the group, you are become the tokens. And when you are tokens, there are 3 different perception tendencies. The first is visibility, which means you stand out due to the low numbers because you're the minority and you're different from the others, and it will lead to performance pressure because you are highly visible to the others. And second is the contrast, which means the dominant group exaggerate differences to strengthen the group boundaries. And third is assimilation, is tokens are distorted to fit gender stereotypes, which means like the role encapsulation is like you're not just representing yourself, you're not just representing your own personalities, you're representing the whole group, like the women group. So we use a mixed methods in our research from the surveys and the interviews. For the survey, it's from like 10 years survey from 2011 to 2021, guided by University Youth League Committee. And we use the regression model for the further analyze. And this is our research hypothesis. We assume that there is a relationship between the females' ratio and their performance and their future professional achievements. It's like the higher the professional female in a given major, the better the academic performance of the female students. And in major where tokenism exists, the academic performance of female students is lower. And like the higher the proportion of female in a given major, the higher expectation females have for their future professional achievements. And in majors where tokenism exists, female students have lower expectations for their future achievements. And these are the qualitative interviews, the composition. We interviewed like the males and females and students from different majors like the information technology, the traditional engineering, and the basic sciences. And for most of the tech interviewees, we can find there is the tokenism phenomenon. And the quantitative result shows that there is a positive correlation between the ratio and academic performance. It's like for every 10 increase in the females ratio, their academic performance increase. And female students in department with at least 30% of women scores higher than those in tokenized departments. And when it comes to the achievement expectations, we can find that a 10% rise in the female ratio correlates with increase in achievement expectations, and students in non-tokenized environments, they do show higher professional expectations. So we found that according to the quantitative research partially confirms like the existence of the tokenism effect. So what are the specific mechanism through which it impacts individuals? So we come to the correlative finding. It also correlates with the counter theory. The first is the visibility and the performance pressure. It's like in a classroom, like around 100 or 200 students, female students are very noticeably seen, and your mistakes are always like noticeably to be seen. And it will lead to the performance pressure. It's like when the interview said that people seem to think that you're really impressive and you're very brilliant, and that put a lot of pressure on you. And you always feel a lot of pressure. If the boys can't keep up, they just can't. And the psychological pressure is not as intense as girls. And as a result, the girls like in the physics departments, 4 of them all transferred because they're not accustomed to the performance pressure and they're not just stay in the major. And the second finding is like the differentiation and the boundary reinforcement. Keller is a very famous STS scholar in, she used to be a physics student at Harvard University, and she described like the sea of seats phenomenon, which means the physical and social isolation in classrooms where male students sit together and leave female students in separate zones. And in our interviewees, we also found like things are quite the same. It's like I sat alone thinking if only I were a boy when I sit here, the boys, they were just sit away from me. And if I arrive first, none of them will sit next to me. And sometimes there is the differential treatment when it comes to the group work. It's like the boys are not assigned too much to the girls. And she didn't think like it's kind of being friendly or favor, because it seems like the boys didn't seem to think the girls' presents make much of a difference. Yeah, and the third is about like assimilation and the role encapsulation. The general encapsulation is like girls are always thinking like the careful traits, which means that they require more attention to detail and which is considered more suited to females. And girls are more likely to take on roles of mediation or compromises. And one of the girls said like it's just her own way of expressing herself, but sometimes it can be understood as like lacking of confidence and assimilate individuals, which means like you're not just yourself, you're representing the group. Like a professor in the STEM fields always like stereotype and fix the role girls of like being fragile and difficult to work with. And some laboratories in STEM fields, they only want to recruit female master students with 3/4, which means like the important task will never be assigned to the female students. And the teacher in the engineering laboratory said like, he thinks that the female students seem to liven up the atmosphere. So that is also the reason why he's willing to recruit some female students in her lab. And finally is the conclusion. We can give a summary. It's like the tokenism effects creates like the significant structural barriers for female STEM undergraduates. It's affecting both their grades and their future aspirations. And the gender disparity in STEM is not just a biological given, which is stressed in our research, nor is it just a lack of individual interest or a structure outcome of proportion. And we have to redefine the environment, not just the individual. We can focus on the early intervention, like from the middle school to high school, and the institutional culture shifts to prevent the leakage of talented women from leaking out from the scientific pipeline. And there are also some intervention strategies we found in our research, just like fostering the peer support networks and using sports or other activities to like break the social barriers between the female and male students. And we also need some like the systematic institutional changes, like the broad-based enrollment to dilute the gender skewness in specific majors. Yeah, and that is all of my presentation today. And willing to hear any suggestions, advice, or questions. And actually, I'm in Canada now, so it's after midnight, so I may not be able to stay until the end of meeting, but you can also email me at this address. I will be willing to talk about this research. Thank you.
Thank you, Chenyue, and thank you for staying up so late.
It's okay.
Yes. Do we have questions for this very interesting and fascinating and very sort of related presentation related to Liv's? If not, then perhaps I can use the role of the sort of the chair and the mediator to ask a question about sort of structure, right? Structure versus individual, because you mentioned, you know, the greater number of student or female students in a classroom, right? The higher sort of ratio, right? Academic achievement and performance. So I was sort of thinking, like, is it kind of redefining the environment and not just so basically, what is the kind of the most, or what would you point to as the sort of most highly effective intervention? So is it more kind of early education or admissions or faculty culture? Kind of like, where can we sort of pinpoint is this sort of the most effective way of actually perhaps pointing to some kind of change?
Yes, yes, I think so because we want to point out like in the previous research we have many research focused on like they're just treat like the racial as a consequence, which means like it's the consequence like when you are not doing well in STEM fields, then you just drop out. And in our research, we want to stress like the racial, which means the structure phenomena, can be a start, which is not just the ending or the outcome of the game. Okay. So we want to focus like there is a racial difference. And as you said, like what is most important to change the situation? From my perspective, I think first is the cultural change is from like, not just the boys are treating these girls in those stereotypes. We can find that there are many professors, they're treating the girls into this like general encapsulation, right? So I think if a girl, when she grew up in the situation or environment like this, it's very hard for her to like foster very optimistic self-recognition for herself. So I think the intervention can start very early. It's like from the childhood, even for her parents in the primary school and for the middle school, the teachers and their counterparts, they have to like change their minds or views about girls learning the STEM fields. And I think for the institution, they have to take special care or um, measures or things like that to prevent these things from happening because it's not just a mind thing or the cultural things. I think it's both of the things have to be done to prevent these phenomena from getting worse. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. And we had a question from Roger again in the chat. If the question is, do you see gender intersecting with other personal parameters such as socioeconomic status, age, and etc.?
Mhm. Oh, I see. Did you see gender intersection with other personal parameters such as yes, yes. I think it's a very good question. And I also see like the gender intersections with other personal parameters such as the social economic um stat um jeez. Yes, yes. Just see gender intersection with other personal parameters. Yes, yes. I think it's a very good question. It's like I think these factors are, tangled together. We can just not like pick one factor out and say that it's, independent from the other variables. And I think like the gender intersecting with other personal parameters, not just like the ratios or the structural things. There is like socioeconomic status, ages, and gender. Yes, I think these things are tangled together. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe, I remember that from our results, those students who come from higher status, they're more likely to be affected by the tokenism situation. So it seems that they are more vulnerable to this kind of discrimination. I remember our results include that part.
That's very interesting, actually. So the one with a sort of a more socioeconomic capital are actually more exposed to it. Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
maybe they're more vulnerable. We think maybe those people from lower socioeconomic status, maybe they're already tough to get into this elite university. So maybe they are better adapting to this kind of environment.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Mhm.
Thank you. Well, there are no other questions, so we'll thank you, Chenyue, and thanks for staying up so late. So we will
Thank
move
you.
on to our next speaker, Yanru, from UCAS.
Hello, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. Depends where you are. Can everybody hear my voice?
It's all working fine. Yep.
Yeah, okay, good. My name is Yanru Xu. I'm from the University of Chinese Academy of Sciences. It's very my great honor to join this seminar. Actually, my research focus or my research area belongs to the integration of higher education and STS. So, previously, uh, it should be that my community belongs more to the higher education, but I think today will be my new beginning that I join the community of STS. And also my recent topic and the articles I published more than like the mix of higher education and science integration. So for today's seminar, my presentation topic is a a project that I followed for like 5 years by far. It's a new educational design by UCAS in the discipline of higher engineering and computing education. The new educational initiative is called the OIPI. Actually, it's called by me. I name it, but the Chinese name I will introduce its Chinese name later on. So today my presentation includes the following four parts. And why do I want to do this research and follow this educational design for 5 years by far? Actually, the research rationale is that it has been widely acknowledged that ensuring inclusion and diversity in higher education, including higher engineering and education, is essential to achieve educational equity, thus social justice. The lack of inclusion has been a persistent problem in worldwide higher education system that is demonstrated from both lengths of educational access and success. Educational access refers to the fact that disadvantaged students are excluded from elite educational or high quality educational opportunities. And educational success means that even after widening accessibility for those students, they are less likely to achieve desirable learning outcomes. The last few decades have witnessed a global trend of high participation systems in higher education. However, the opportunities, thus high quality educational resources in elite universities have not expanded. That causes stratification among elite and non-elite universities. In the context of higher education massification and disparities between elite and non-elite universities, the diversity and inclusion problems can be interpreted as, on the one hand, the educational access to high quality educational opportunities and resources. On the other hand, how to promote students' academic success after obtaining the educational accessibility. For the Chinese context, there is an institutional stratification in China's higher education system. Universities in the double first-class university plan, 双一流大学, are elite universities enjoying the prestigious status with high social reputation, financial capability, qualified human resources than their non-elite counterparts. The students in elite universities can access and participate in various high-quality teaching and learning opportunities, which positively contributes to their academic success. However, the majority of high school graduates in China has been excluded from the high-quality educational opportunities in elite universities. The competition for accessing rich and high-quality educational opportunities in elite universities, China is likened to thousands of troops crossing a single log bridge. To cross the bridge, high school students' scores in the National College Entrance Examination, that is Gaokao, have significantly determined which level of universities a student can enter in China. However, Gaokao is a high-stake once-for-all exam. This results many outstanding students being unable to access quality higher education. Facing the association between accessing to elite university, academic research, and policy practices previously tend to advance the inclusion of higher education, emphasizing the absolutely increased number of disadvantaged learners presented in elite university. Nonetheless, achieving inclusion in higher education through enhancing human agency has been in the second place. This relates to the capability stance focusing on agents' effectiveness possibilities to make valued choices and achieve the desirable outcomes in understanding educational injustice and justice. The capability stance stresses what people can effectively able to do and to be with valued opportunities from which they can choose. In relation to inclusion in higher education, the first key is to offer free choices to opportunities that students value. The second is to build students' self-determining agency, making use of opportunities to achieve doings and beings they want. Facing the theoretical stance and the previous literature and practices, the OIPI initiative in China was launched by UCAS in 2019. Its Chinese name is 一生一心, means one student, one chip. The OIPI initiative seeks to broaden the inclusion of higher engineering education in China, especially in the field of electronic design, the chip. And to achieve this, it aims to, on the one hand, widen the accessibility of students enrolled in non-elite universities to high-quality educational opportunities, especially in UCAS. On the other hand, support these students' self-forming agency to acquire desired academic success they want, which means that those students will be able to tap out their chip in the OIPI initiative. The OIPI initiative is a systematic educational design, including 4 elements, that is open platform, individualized pathways, project-based learning, and inductive tutoring. The open platform element consists of open-in, that is open enrollment, open result, and open-out, that is you can create it at any time. Individualized pathways are made up of personalized learning content, self-directed pace, and flexible assessment. Project-based learning includes modularized tasks and integration of knowledge into practices. Inductive tutoring comprises Socrates guidance and procedural monitoring. Actually, the notions of those 4 elements are very rich, but I have no time to go into deep of them each. If you are interested, welcome to have further discuss after this seminar. So what's the result of this initiative? Actually, following during my 5-year follow-up research, a bunch of candidates in this initiative they have tapped out with registration status in non-elite universities. So we conducted the semi-structured interviews with 11 successful students who in the OIPI initiative who enrolled in non-elite universities outside the UCAS. So we would like to answer this question. How did the OIPI initiative broaden inclusion through promoting students' valued academic access and desired valued academic access and desired academic success? Our funding, we abstract our funding into the picture on the screen, and we use the self-regulated learning perspective to analyze our data. The figure is a little bit complicated, but summarily, the mechanism is a dynamic chain, and including the external chain, internal chain, and the agentic behavior. Specifically, the externally, this initiative allows students accessing resources that they like, and also we see that the accessing, as our participants told us, that accessing resource is the first step leading to success, and the resource in UCAS provide the students who enrolled in non-elite universities to the high quality resources that they cannot enjoy in their registered university. And internally, this initiative enhanced the students' disciplinary abilities and boosted their self-efficacy. That mechanism is should owe to the OIPI initiative design. That is the 4 elements that are introduced just now. And the most important is that the agentic behavior, supporting by the external resource and the internal abilities and self-efficacy, our participants performed the agentic behavior in the which is demonstrated by their self-regulated learning strategies. Specifically, we can see that their strategies, the main strategies is have 3 dimensions. The one dimension is their goals, that is shown in green, and the second dimension is their metacognition, shown in yellow, and most importantly, the direct causes for their agentic behavior, that is their self-efficacy, that is they believe in their selves, and they believe they are able to achieve success. So what's for our research? And like I just said, that previous research and previous academic discussions and practices seems to value the absolute number of increased the enrollment of into elite universities, broaden their participation, but they ignored that student agency count more. So I believe that my research, or the research of our team, broaden the inclusion discussion in higher education, and especially in higher engineering education, through an agency-oriented stance, and we hope more and more researchers or practitioners could pay attention to student agency. And the second, a person's ability to achieve valuable outcomes can be greatly enhanced by public action and policy. I believe that everyone in social sciences are familiar with the social structure and agency things, their interactions. We value agency, but we also acknowledge that public attention and policy is helpful to enhance individual agency. And second, from our fundings, we advocate that for disadvantaged students, and to promote their access and to promote their success, we should first distribute or create opportunities for them. and then construct external learning environment, which could enhance learner internal and behavioral processes. Eventually, we hope that even though we call them disadvantaged students, so we hope that they can achieve their valued learning outcomes while self-forming agency. That's all for me, and questions are welcomed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Yanru. Do we have questions? If not, I may have a quick one, just very quick, but I don't want to take up. No, okay. So just very quickly, so we can keep the schedule running. You mentioned that so you mentioned there, I think it was actually towards the very end, right? That the sort of access without support, right, is not really opportunity, right? So there's one on one hand is the individual, right, and then the other one is more of like a structural element. But I'm just thinking, like, because you mentioned the Gaokao, so like how much actually do students from sort of this non-elite backgrounds actually, I mean, how much room is there to actually exercise this agency, when on the one hand you still have the Gaokao as that which sort of defines, right, where you go?
Yeah, that's very good question, and you came to the main point, after very key point, that the proportion, the proportion. I think it depends on, actually it depends on the definition of disadvantaged students in China. If we want to define disadvantaged students, we should also mention that social institutions as the hukou system in China. Actually, my PhD thesis is about it. Actually, I came from sociology of higher education, but now actually I'm in higher education governance and higher education and STS. But my PhD thesis is about urban and rural student access to elite Chinese elite universities. If we define disadvantaged student status in China by hukou status, I should say that there is less than 10%, the rural students, and such number is decreased and recently if we say that actually, and also a group of number is that there is more than 300 higher education institutions in China now. 300, more than 300, nearly 4,000, more than 3,000. If I am not wrong, it should be 3,400 also. But the double first elite universities, the number of double first elite universities in China is only 147. So such proportion, and you can so I think we should do double step calculations. One is the ratio of elite universities and all higher education institutions. That is the first step. The second step is the portion of students in elite universities. So it's a double step calculation. But actually, I did my PhD research like 7 years ago, and I was doing my PhD research, the proportion is very low. And actually, I have no exact number of the current status, but I believe that the proportion is decreased because the polarization of society is increased, and so yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll move on to the next speaker, Zhanhong Wen.
And I have one more, like, yeah. I'm very, very sorry because I have another meeting I have to attend, so I have to leave now. But very thanks for everyone to join this seminar, and I hope we can have further collaborations in the future. And you can drop me email if there is any like questions to discuss. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Yes, we have a next speaker ready, I see. So yeah, I won't take up any more time.
Yes, of course. Okay,
Yes.
can you hear me clearly?
Yes, it's all working fine.
Okay, I'm trying to share my screen. Okay. Is everything okay?
It's all
My
good.
screen? Okay. So I try to. Okay. So hello everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. Okay, my name is Zhanhong Wen, and I'm currently a master's student at Tsinghua University. And it's my great pleasure to share my recent work with you. So over the next 10 minutes, I want to take you on a journey into the sensory worlds of visually impaired people. I would like to begin with a quote from Dennis Diderot's essays, which is also the starting point of this research. So in this essay, Diderot wrote, people try to give those born blind the gift of sight, but rightly consider science would be equally advanced by questioning a sensible blind man. We should learn to understand his psychology and should compare it with ours. And perhaps we should thereby come to a solution of the difficulty which make the theory of vision and of the senses so intricate and so confused. So inspired by this argument, this research draws on extensive ethnographic fieldwork in a school for the blind and foregrounding the lived experience of blind and visually impaired people to deeply understand what it truly means to navigate, design, and interpret the world without sight. And to fully unpack this, my research tries to build a theoretical bridge between critical disability studies and South studies. So from disability studies, I draw specifically on crip technoscience, or let's say feminist STS, and which is an orientation that views disabled people as innovative experts and active designer of their own daily lives. And this definitely shifts the narrative away from suffering and limitation, placing crip authorship at the center of our research. So next, I try to speak to the area of sound study, which can inspire us to focus on the sonic texture of blind and visually impaired people's everyday life, because actually they can sit, right? So they rely heavily on all kinds of sound. And then in this background, I then rely on the framework of acoustemology, which is a concept introduced by anthropologist Stephen Fate, defined as one's sonic way of knowing and being in the world. So this framework is vital because it rejects the framing of hearing as merely a secondary or a supplementary sense to vision. So instead, it asserts that knowing through sound is always contextual and emergent. So based on this, I finally put forward a new concept. I would call it sound knowledge. So which describes forms of knowledge generated exclusively through auditory experience that are inherently situated, relational, and embodied. So underneath such framework, and we may ask questions like, through what mechanism do visual impaired people construct their knowledge, and how does this kind of knowledge differ from knowledge that is typically dominated by visual objectivity? So how can these differences help us to understand the social situation of visually impaired people? So to truly capture how sound organizes the reality of blind and visually people, I fully immersed myself in a municipal school for the blind for about 6 months, sharing everything from morning running exercise to daily meals and classroom instruction and student affairs. So the core approach of my field study can be concluded like doing anthropology in sound, which means I focus merely on sonic course, on sonic side of their daily lives. So based on these rich daily interactions, the following ethnographic findings are structured into 3 parts. So in the first part, I would call it the auditory area of BVIP, which is short for blind and visually impaired people. In this session, I will look at how the rise of visually governed smart technology has severely restricted tactile engagement, forcing a forced transition toward a heavy reliance on screen readers and other auditory information. And next, I will dive into the core part, which is the mechanism of sound knowledge and the networks of meaning. So I will investigate the specific mechanism of how they generate distinct forms of knowledge, exclusively through auditory experience, and how they actively use these cognitive strategies to organize their everyday life. And in the last part, I will examine sensory hierarchies and the politics of knowledge, and I will contrast this auditory framework with visual centric model of objectivity. So let's contextualize this within our contemporary digital landscape. So we often assume that a technological advancement may make life universally more accessible, but my interview with Romo, an organism engineer who lost his sight at 15 years old, and reveals a different reality. So the modern shift toward touch screens seen in smart microwaves, rice cooker, and smartphones and other daily objects has severely restricted tactile interaction, rendering many devices incredibly frustrating or unusable for blind and visual people. So thanks to screen readers in mobile phone or screen readers in a digital computer, and hearing has become the central and obligatory mode of navigating their digital environment. So recalling to what I called auditory area. So beyond digital interfaces, sound function as a fundamental tool for physical and social navigation. In my ethnographic encounters, I observe how sound can construct a spatial geometry and manage their social presence. For instance, one of my students named Ma Yu routinely use active let's say echolocation, because by clapping her hand before a word, the returning echo allows her to detect and identify physical obstacles. So at the same time, the clap can alert others to detect and identify her presence. So furthermore, while sighted people rely on facial recognition, and blind and visual impaired people recognize individuals through unique sonic signatures. So they can recognize one through the distinct jingle of bracelet. So this continuous sensory engagement is not a passive reception of background noise, background sound, and it is a highly active daily practice of structuring spatial and social reality without visual gaze. And this brings us to the core mechanism of how sound knowledge is actively constructed. I will give an example. And different from what we thought, purely visual concept like space, color, can synthesis through complex network of auditory meaning. For example, when discussing a movie, a student named Wang Fei confidently described a character as having red hair and very fair skin. She did not rely on visual data, of course, because she can see the character. Rather, she deduced it because the character was very cool, she told me, and she didn't seem to be some normal student's girl, you know. So by synthesizing her mother's auditory rule that students are not allowed to dye their hair, and with literary tropes pairing beauty and fair skin, and she logically projected this color onto the character. And we can see, and this is Aime. So we can tell it is in no way a red hair, fair skin girl. I would say Wang Fei wasn't just wrong about this. She tries to figure out the color, the image of Aime through her own network of meaning. It is just an alternative way of engaging the world. And this distinct embodied way of knowing challenges our modern standard of static objectivity, which Lauren Deston and Peter Gallison have shown it is historically rooted in visual culture. And this history established a rigid sensory hierarchy operating on the premise that seeing is believing and seeing is right. So, and we can see the comparison on this page. I compare the visual paradigm and the auditory paradigm. I shall emphasize this is in no way a straight right comparison, but one may find it very useful to think about the question. So, finally, we may figure out that the auditory ways of knowing have been systematically marginalized, establish a rigid sensory hierarchy where vision defines the truth. So just think about the meaning of enlightenment. So the light just shed on your body. So furthermore, I would say sight-oriented knowledge can also create forms of operation. So-called blindisms, such as continuous body rotation or head shaking, eye rubbing, which I found out during my field work that many students have this kind of weird behavior. Actually, they are entirely unperceived and normal within no visual reality, because one just can't see what is happening if the outside world keeps silent. So this is in no way a stereotype, yet because they deviate from what the sighted consider normal, and they are actively and medically corrected by school, by the hospitals, thus enforcing a sighted bodily standard onto blind individuals. So in conclusion, we start from talking about auditory area and to the concept about sound knowledge and finally sensory hierarchies. I really want to emphasize that we may arrive at the conclusion that true inclusivity or true accessibility requires moving from merely physical design. We must dismantle the myth of visual objectivity to call for a more responsive system of knowledge production that honor diverse sensory experience. Finally, we arrive at what Donna Haraway has reminded. We must refuse the illusion of total objectivity, and all forms of knowledge can only be our embodied accounts of the truth. So by validating sound knowledge, we invite the sighted majority to suspend their deeply reflect on visual assumption and actively embrace a much more pluralistic sensory world. So thank you so much for your time and attention today. I look forward to your question. Yes.
Thank you, Zhanhong. Yeah, very interesting. So fascinating. I'm sure we have lots of questions. Do we have questions for Zhanhong? Okay, I might start. Okay, so whilst people are digesting or figuratively, right?
Thank you.
And processing everything, I just want to ask you just quickly, because you mentioned, I thought it was very interesting, the microwave design, right? How it's kind of like in order to make it more advanced, more modern, right? You sort of we're going away from there was the quote, right? Where sort of there used to be knobs, right? You can actually adjust it sort of tactically, right? And now we're sort of moving away from it because everything looks so I mean, so advanced, if you will. So I'm sort of thinking when you actually move this sort of upgrade, right? So when we move more into this kind of a digital age, right? These visual interfaces. So these technology developers, like, are they beginning, or do you see it like to take sort of a sound knowledge, as you call it, right, seriously? Or is it still more of like an afterthought, kind of like, okay, maybe we should do something because there is sound, right, in the microwave, let's say, right, when you actually want to put in the timer, right, it does make a sound, but it makes a uniform kind of a, the same, right? You can't really distinguish it whether you're pressing one or the other. Like, so are they actually taking this kind of seriously in this design, like, and not just in terms of tokenism, right, that we mentioned earlier? So how do you actually see it as sort of evolving?
Thank you for your question. It's very interesting because I think these all things are happening, right? Because some designers are trying to think through sound, because they may add some specific sound quiz to tell people what they are doing and where they've been. Let's see, maybe some elevator. You in the elevator, and you can when you push which floor, and then the sound will just tell you which floor have you been. So, but in some design, just as I said, the visual paradigm can be the main paradigm when they think about one design, and they just want to let the microwave, let's say, more fascinating, because when you design a screen on the microwave, it just see very advanced. And I would say in this stage, many designers are just thinking about some visual beauty, or just some visual dominating design, but they won't think about how blind and visual people are going to use it, and can they use it? And this is not the question they are thinking about. So maybe that's the reason why I said the area of disability studies should just develop further, and to develop more knowledge about human and human and technology interaction. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do we have questions for Zhanhong before we move to the next and our last speaker?
This is very fascinating, but also it must be very challenging
Yes.
research to do, given the topic and all the field site. Can you share the biggest challenge in your research process?
Yes, of course. And my research, my field work site is in a municipal school for the blind, and the biggest challenge, I would say, how to make friends with all of my interviewee or all of my students, because as a CIT researcher, they may feel that actually on the first day I came to the classroom, one of my students told me that I don't want you to join our class because you are sighted and you don't know what we are experiencing. So, but this is actually the main situation I faced at the first time of my field work site. But I just think that you can, as a researcher, at the first time you came into the field work, you can't see yourself as a researcher, actually, because later I see myself as a full-time intern teacher, and I compare and I accompany them from morning exercise to lunch and to their after-school activities. So gradually, I can become very close friends with them, and it takes time, actually. So, I mean, I would say that in this research, or in all kinds of disability research, how to deal with your interviewee and how to dive into your field work site is the biggest challenge in every research. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Zhanhong. Yeah, very, very interesting. And
Yes.
so I would move on to our last speaker. Yeah, Joel.
Okay.
Yeah, we're running a bit late, but I hope you don't mind too much. And we will so we will have our last sort of a speaker presenter, and then we'll sort of wrap it up towards the end and look forward to tomorrow.
Hello, everyone. Do you hear me properly?
It's all good. Yes.
So my name is Joel Champalay, and I'm a PhD candidate at the Graduate School of Science and Technology Policy at KAIST in South Korea. And I should preface that my topic is not really about diversity or inclusivity. It's more about sustainability, but I couldn't present yesterday for schedule issues. But I'm here today, and I will present about making the Korean smart city sustainable, a policy and institutional history, which is part of my PhD project that I'm currently doing. So even if smart cities can be found in multiple shapes and forms, most of them have one common characteristic, which is a heavy reliance on new technologies of information and communication to render more efficient urban infrastructure and services. And in South Korea, they have been developed, built, and inhabited since the beginning of the 2000s. And concurrently to efficiencies, the idea is that smart cities would bring forward a more sustainable future of urban space, lasting over multiple generations without destroying the environment and reducing social inequities was advanced. In 2008, the Ubiquitous City Act is passed by the Korean government as a way to improve the competitiveness of cities by stipulating matters related to the efficient construction and management of ubiquitous cities and to contribute to the improvement of the quality of life of the people and the balanced development of the nation by promoting sustainable development. This injunction was towards sustainable development was more concretely inscribed in national policy. So the National Strategy of Sustainable Development under President Roh Moo-hyun in 2005 and the Green Growth Agenda of President Myung-mak Lee in 2008. And both those agendas have articulated environmental issues and technology more clearly together at the national level. It is reinforced by the publication in 2017 of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Fourth Industrial Revolution by President Moon Jae-in in 2017. The same year, the Ubiquitous City Act was transformed into the Smart City Act, where a smart city is a sustainable city that provides various urban services based on urban infrastructure built by converging and integrating construction and information and communication technologies to improve the city's competitiveness and quality of life. In this research, I was questioning to what extent smart entails sustainability is the vision of the Korean
I'm just sorry to interrupt you,
central
Joel.
government
It seems
of
like
smart city.
you're
And I argue that
breaking
through the
up.
appropriation by the Korean central government of the concept of smart city, the understanding of sustainability is
It's yeah, sorry
I
about
don't
that. It
really
seems like
have
you're
a
breaking up. I don't know if
yes.
was it just me or
I don't really have a answer for breaking up.
It says, yeah, same problem from my
Okay.
side, on my side as well.
Yeah, so it seems like it might be at your end. I don't know if perhaps something else is going on in the background, like either in terms of internet connection or some
Yeah, I
process.
think my internet connection was a bit having a struggle. I'm gonna try again right now.
Okay,
If it breaks
thanks.
again, I'll let me know again. So I don't know where I was exactly before I broke down, but concretely my argument was that through the appropriation by the Korean central government of the concept of smart city, the understanding of sustainability struggled to balance between economic, social, and environmental priorities, leading to the need for a constant redefinition of both the meaning of smartness and sustainability. And for this research, I relied on document analysis of South Korean policy, legal documents, and other archival sources, as well as semi-structured interviews with local government and researchers working on smart city development. One of the specificities of South Korea is the creation of a legal and institutional framework dedicated only to the smart city under the leading role of the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport. The Ubiquitous City Act, which became the Smart City Act in 2017, serves as the basis for smart city public policy. Complementing these laws, 4 master plans were published, serving as roadmap to advise local government and ministries since 2009. And from those materials, we can see emerge 4 generations of smart city. The first generation is a ubiquitous city, which was framed through the slogan of every time, everywhere. It materialized through a network of sensors and technologies, legal and planning framework, as well as institution, and focused mainly on economic sustainability. The second generation, the safe ubiquitous city, was built upon the first generation's infrastructure. One field was selected for stronger development, safety. This materialized through the development of national safety net with a network of CCTVs, ubiquitous integrated management platforms, and urban integrated operation centers. In both the first and second generations, economic sustainability understood that achieving a sustainable business model capable of resiliency in the face of shocks, such as economic crisis and disasters, was at the center of smart city policymaking. The third generation, the smart city, marks an essential reframing from ubiquitous towards smart, and this change was due to the lack of understanding from the public of the term ubiquitous and the usage of smart in the international market. New values of smart urbanism were promoted, more specifically people-oriented cities and environmental and social sustainability. The fourth and current generation continues to build upon the idea of a more eco-friendly and citizen-oriented smart technology implementation. It also made efforts to connect smart cities with other sustainable urban projects, such as the Zero Carbon City project. Despite sustainable development being legally recognized in the Smart City Act as a reason for the existence of smart cities, social and environmental concerns appeared only after 10 years of development, overshadowed by the potentiality of economic opportunities smart city could bring to the Korean economy. Of the three pillars of sustainable development, economic sustainability has been the one that worried the most the Korean state since the beginning of the 2000s. More specifically, in the first Ubiquitous City Plan, the word sustainable is mentioned 5 times, always in relationship with the idea of business model. The top-down management and government-led public project to the Ubiquitous City had trouble finding stability with their private partner. The example of the city of Songdo, the first ubiquitous city of Korea, has been extensively studied by scholars in that regard. After 10 years, the lack of sustainable economic business model prompted the need to rethink how the private and public partnership have been led by the Korean government. As such, when the Ubiquitous became the smart city, new regulations regarding the implication of big technology consortium and high-tech SMEs were issued, and 2 new institutions in charge of. I'm breaking down again. Am I?
I think you're breaking up. Yeah. Not sure whether it seems to be like internet connection.
I will try and stop. Give me a moment.
No problem.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Then I might stop sharing my screen. I think it's making it breaking down a little bit too much. So
Yeah, no problem.
yeah, so
No, your voice is quite
or
clear.
I'll just
Yeah.
okay. So as such, when the Ubiquitous became the smart city, new regulations regarding the implication of big technology consortium and high-tech SMEs were issued, and 2 new institutions in charge of managing private-public network and private network were created: the Smart City Convergence Alliance and the Smart City Association in 2018. In particular, the last one, created under the Article 28 of the Smart City Law, was put in charge of managing the Smart City Solution Market website, listing existing public, national, and local smart city projects, Korean smart city-related companies and startups, and updates on project calls and offers. My next slide, which you cannot see, is on environmental and social sustainability, which, despite being the part of the definition of sustainability, only really appeared as an essential part of smart city development starting in 2017, as the ubiquitous city was transformed into the smart city. The lack of attention to social and environmental issues was prompted as one of the weak points of the ubiquitous city model. Going from the U-City to the smart city required creating a new set of values, and you would see on my screen a schema of the Korean Ministry of Land and Infrastructure and Transport, which on one side has the ubiquitous city values and on the other side the smart city values. And among other things, smart cities are to be people-oriented cities where technology would be developed according to spatial specificity and where social and environmental sustainability would be implemented through platform technologies such as a digital twin. In practice, this meant creating new scales of smart city projects to better reach out to the needs of the population and involve citizens earlier in the creation process of smart city as a way to avoid the repetition of the lack of appropriation and phantom city critics that have plagued early UCT projects in Korea, such as Songdo. We can mention here the Smart City Challenges, new policy project to discover solutions through the bottom-up demand of local government and private companies, or regulatory sandboxes. To complement this new smaller scales, 2 new national pilot smart city project, Master Plan Ex Nihilo Urban Development Project, supposed to embody the new values of a smart city, environment and social inclusion were announced. First, the Zhanhong 5-1 neighborhood, a citizen-centered governance and database sustainable innovation ecosystem through big data, digital twin and AI project. And the second project being Busan Eco Delta Smart City, focusing on smart water technology, smart energy technology, and a living lab with strong involvement of citizens and residents. The final redefinition of sustainability in the Korean smart city development passed through introducing already existing parallel urban planning project and the framework of the smart city since 2024, in particular hydrogen cities and zero carbon cities. If we look at the 20 years of development of smart cities, smartness doesn't seem to mean sustainability, at least not in the way both sustainability and smartness are currently conceived by the Korean government. As mentioned in the latest Smart City Plan in 2024, efforts in environmental, social, and economic sustainability are still necessary. Whether it is an issue of the market, governance model, technology, or involved actor, it is still hard to say, as it seems to vary according to the project. In the end, did environmental and social sustainability really lead to a redefinition of the smart city model? Maybe when we look at the national decision-making level, because when we look at existing assembly meeting minutes, there seems to be a consensus of the need of the existence of smart city. But criticism are stronger at the local level. If we take, for example, the second national pilot smart city project, Busan Eco Delta City, there is strong critics between the eco-labelization and the environmental degradation of the Nakdong River estuary, where it is built, around water quality, algae, or migratory birds. Another question point is the current turn towards AI of the Korean government and the announcement in March 2026 of a new pilot AI smart city, which will also add a new layer of questions and development in the questions of the sustainability in the Korean smart cities. Here it is. Sorry for the end of the presentation without the slide and the internet issues.
Thank you so much, Joel. Yeah, no, that's the it is what happens, right? Sometimes, so you just got to do it any way you can. But no, it's very good, very interesting. Yeah, let's open it up to everybody to questions. Anybody got questions for Joel?
Can I ask a simple question? Can you hear me? Okay. I just want to thank you very much for your presentation. I just wonder how developed is the relation between high and low technologies in smart cities, whether there's an understanding what sustainability actually looks like in a city in terms of land and land use, green space and transportation channels on top of the electronic and digital infrastructure that people mostly focus on. Thank you.
So if I take an example, for example, Busan Eco Delta City, which is built in the Nakdong River estuary, if you add on to the smart water or smart energy technologies, there is also the idea that the land will be, I am breaking down again, no, that the land will be developed through low development infrastructure, LDI architecture. And so they made specific form of like how the road are going to be built. And they also had mandatory need to allocate space for example, migratory birds, because it was a specificity of that area. But this is very specific to Busan Eco Delta City. And despite all of those attempts at making it eco-friendly, the results, as I said, are a bit more critically discussable because there's still impact on the water quality. They were never able to promote it at the actual legal level it should be for it to be a proper safe water zone. And so despite having LID, low impact development in our architecture, some type of new technologies to make water more pure, but it's water more pure for consumption. It's not water more pure as a natural element in the environment. So there is a kind of a tension there, especially in this project. And I know it's something that has been also discussed a little bit in the Sejong 5.1 project, but I'm less familiar with it because there is also the Kum River, which is another Korean river there, and some marshes. I think this is the English word. Water, some type of water marshes, which are there and which needs also some form of environmental protection legally. Legally, they're mandatory for them to protect it. The reality is it translates mostly by the idea that drones are going to be sent to observe the area and avoid people going in. But outside of this, whichever else impacts the marshes is going to be a bit more discussable and a bit more difficult to link to the smart city project, because it's not necessarily the smart city project and more the development of the land around protected areas, which is an issue. I hope it helped answer some of your questions.
Do we have more questions? Joel, again, if not, I may have a quick one. I just want to give people a chance to, yeah, process. Okay, so I had a quick one. You had a slide before, you know, the connection issues. You had that. I think it was your own, right? It was kind of like a timeline. Of the smart city sort of development. And if I remember, so basically like economic part of it was kind of a constant, right? Whilst the other ones were kind of added on later. So I was sort of thinking, you know, is this smartness thing? You know, is it kind of a rebranding, like, or is kind of the economic growth kind of the main pillar? And then everything else is kind of, you know, yeah, a rebranding basically, or has it actually changed how sort of urban, you know, planners sort of put emphasis on the environment?
So historically, Korea has strongly used urban planning project as a way to restart their economy when there is big crisis. So there is this historical pattern, which is having huge construction project was able to restart in the 90s the Korean economy with the chaebol, which are huge companies at the time. So, and the apparition of the smart city project kind of coincides in the early 2000s and all of this with other economic crisis. And my opinion, it's my personal opinion, I don't really have proof to do that, is that it was another way for them to restart I am breaking down again. To restart the Korean economy, but using a new way, their new assets, which were high tech. Korea was trying to strongly move from the petrochemical industries and heavy industries to the high tech and this kind of industries. And so they meshed together two things, which one they knew was able to grow economy before, which was urban real estate planning, and their new economy industries, which was high tech. So economy was always in my guess the main reason for this. But at the same time, we see emerging in the same parallel time concerns around green growth and agenda around national sustainable development. But it's actually quite hard in practice to see the connection between the two. Mostly, especially in the beginning of the smart city, you needed to build the architecture and the infrastructure for it to work and for you to be able to show something or make all of the systems, smart city systems working. And and the initial push for having this kind of law was early project by private companies on ubiquitous city, which broke down because of the lack of communication between public and private partners. So I think there was also a need to regulate there the relationship between private and public industries. And so environmental and social sustainability came back, like despite sustainability being put into law, came back really late because it was not their priority. Their priority was reconnecting with their private companies and have a new growth engine for the national economy with the smart city, or hoping the smart city would create a new growth engine.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Seems like we have no other questions. So I'm trying to, I've been, keeping notes and everything just to see like how, what are sort of the common themes, So we had inclusion basically today, right? From sort of multiple angles. We had, within like jazz educational programs, right? And Chinese STEM universities and sensory perceptions or hierarchies, right? So it seemed kind of like the notion, or perhaps even what would you call it, a trap of tokenism, right, was kind of a common, and access, if you will, is common throughout this, but throughout the presentations, right? That despite sort of the numbers, or simply by increasing numbers, right? Whether it's more women in jazz or in STEM, right? That is not the same as inclusion, right? So it seems to me kind of the theme is that sort of this structural change, right? And without structural change to this kind of environment, this notion of access or inclusion, right, leads to tokenism and sort of even kind of a visibility. We didn't actually mention it before, but there was a notion, right, that actually, that visibility, the sort of hyper visibility, right, is actually that which is not necessarily a good thing, right? It kind of leads to isolation, like paradoxically, right? So basically, without support, right, that access is not really an opportunity. So this is kind of what I thought is kind of very interesting how, so I'm just sort of thinking like, basically when you look at this notion of adaptation, right, across all presentations, it kind of the responsibility, right, always falls on this sort of individual, right, the marginalized individual, right, the female student, right, or the visually impaired person, or a female jazz musician, right? So I wanted to just sort of to conclude, to ask all of the sort of panelists here sort of how to sort of shift the burden, right, away from the individual and back onto this sort of structural change to the institution. Basically, how do you do that, right? How do you change the default setting, if you will, right? Do we have any? I mean, do we have any thoughts on that? Basically, how do we sort of not look at the individual, but look at the sort of the grander scheme of things?
I mean, if nobody is speaking, my topic was
It's
not
an open. We just conclude. Yeah, thank you, Chenyue.
and
Yeah.
my issue was a bit slightly different because for me, I spoke about the grander scheme,
Yeah.
and the difficulty was accessing the individuals, and the way they did this was strongly through living labs. Living labs was and smaller scales of project initiated by private individuals. So and actually with some especially for example having policy exemption to create some apps which would, for example, one big example would be an app to help visually impaired people navigate inside of the public space, to go back to Zhanhong's presentation. But in Korea, you cannot access the plan inside the building if you're not the owner of the building. And so they required and requested policy exemption to be able to have access to this plan and create this app which would allow auditory sound and auditory explanation of this physical space inside of a building. And it was called, I think this was a smart challenge or one of the smaller scales they created after 2017. This was a very, very successful, one of the successful challenges that they made. And so I guess policy exemption, so reaching out to the state to be able to have this type of policy exemption, which can benefit the individual, could be a way. Is despite it in Korea being the other way around, I'm thinking there might be a way to do it from the bottom, even more from the bottom up to the top down. So the top down allowing the bottom up to exist and make requests. Or there could be a way also for the bottom up to exist. Yeah.
Mm. Anybody? Yeah, okay. I mean, that's again, we're just we're here to discuss ideas and something thinking like of how it's so interesting to see all these connections throughout the presentations. And even though Joel, yes, I mean, we had to shift you around a little bit, so it's kind of but we made it work. I think it's just sort of interesting just to see how this is sort of like a starting. I mean, everything. That's how kind of I feel about my own research, right, into anything, despite all the years doing it. It just always feels like a starting point, right, towards something, and then you go on and on and on, just more and more of it, And but what you do see is these commonalities. Is kind of like these visible, or usually it's invisible, right? Elements that actually make individuals or even groups marginalized, and yet in some cases they're actually not visible. They're not invisible. They're actually highly visible or even hyper visible, right? And then what does that do to the overall structure, and how do we proceed from there? But I would like to thank everybody. Yeah, thanks so much. This has been fascinating, and we did run a bit long, and we had some technical issues to deal with. And despite all those, we worked it out. So we have one last session tomorrow, and then we will conclude, and that will be the last of the webinar series. So we've had 2 already, and this will be the last one before some of us, or many of us, actually meet up in Beijing this summer. Thank you so much, everybody, and thanks so much for joining us. And I hope to see you tomorrow.
I will see you in Beijing.
And I'll see you in Beijing. Looking forward to it.
Okay.
Thanks so much. All right.